Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Lauren Feldman, and I'm here today with John Ahrensmeyer, who is founder and CEO of Small Business Majority, an advocacy group for businesses and entrepreneurs. Happy Monday, John.
Happy Monday, Lauren. Good to be here.
Welcome back. Always great to have you here. So, John, as he promised, Donald Trump hit the ground running last week with a slew of executive orders, many of which will have a very direct impact on business owners. I want to ask you about that. But first, remind us, what does Small Business Majority do?
We're a small business advocacy organization. We do lobbying and advocacy on behalf of small business in the nation's capital and also in 11 states across the country. We have 12 offices across the country, and in addition to advocacy, we provide connections to resources, we educate small businesses, and we do a lot of research to support our work. And in particular, we focus on the smallest businesses, and in many cases, those in the most under-resourced communities. They're the ones that really need the help the most. And so we act to serve them, be a connector with them to government, a connector with them to resources. And, it's all kind of a, sort of a hub and spoke model that, it's a unified whole.
Do you have members? Do owners join your organization, or do you have followers? Do you just represent business owners in general? How does that work?
We have a network of 85,000 small businesses, and they've come to us in a variety of different ways. They've joined us for events. They've signed on to petitions. They sign up for our newsletter. We regularly communicate with them. And that's sort of the core of what we use to figure out the issues to focus on, and then to have real small businesses be spokespeople for their concerns and needs and provide us with real information about what we need to be doing.
You mentioned that the businesses involved with your group tend to be smaller. Do you have a range of general size?
Well, it actually matches the demographics of businesses across the country. About 80% have 10 employees or fewer, and many of those are actually solo entrepreneurs. And that really reflects the reality, and particularly in the last 4 years, when you've had about 20 million new businesses started, many of those are very small and in most cases are still solo businesses. And they're the ones who have the least voice and the least power, and the ones who really need support the most.
That said, your group is nonpartisan, correct?
We are nonpartisan.
So tell me, what are you and those 85,000 businesses, as best you can judge, making of the Trump administration's first week?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty and in some cases fear. A big issue now, and one that really wasn't on our radar screen before the election, is tariffs. That's something you actually featured last week on your podcast. First of all, nobody really knows what is going to happen, what Trump is going to do. But we've done some research of our network since the election, and this is an issue we focused on. And businesses say 54% say that they're concerned for their own businesses or their own supply chain. 41% very concerned, and when they talk about the economy in general, 76% are concerned and 64% are very concerned about what's going to happen with tariffs. Look, most small businesses either sell foreign-made goods or they make products that require foreign-made parts. And this could upend their business. They already have been dealing with inflation. They don't have a lot of opportunity to raise costs anymore. And they're concerned. And we started hearing about this anecdotally right after the election. And now we've done this research, and we're very concerned about where this is going to go. And unfortunately, the way the system's structured, there's not a lot we can do. The president does have this quote unquote emergency power to implement tariffs. We're hoping we can make the case that this is going to be really harmful to small businesses, but we're going to have to see.
I'm a little surprised by the numbers that you gave, given the size of the businesses that you're surveying. I wouldn't have thought that as many of those businesses, as you've indicated, actually expect a direct impact on their own business. Were you surprised by that too?
Not really. The reality of our global economy is that small businesses sell a lot of products that are made abroad. or at least parts of them are made abroad, and those who are manufacturing or putting products together use foreign-made parts and supplies. So we're not, now look, it was about half that were concerned for their own business or their own supply chain, but when they look around at the overall economy, they're even more concerned. So no, we weren't really that surprised by the numbers.
Of course, the thing in this issue is that Donald Trump has been saying all along that it's the foreign governments who actually pay these tariffs, as opposed to the people who import the goods. Do you think he really believes that? What do you make of that?
I don't know what he believes. I mean, it comes out in the cost in the end. It's not. It's if you're having to pay, if someone along the way is having to pay a tariff to the government, then it gets reflected in the price, and ultimately, by being reflected in the price, it's paid for by the consumer. And small businesses are selling to consumers. They're going to have to reflect those costs in their price.
All right. Take me to another issue. How about immigration? How's that looking to your group?
Well, again, I mean, look, we've had a situation for years where we've needed desperately to have a rational solution to this. We were big supporters of the bill that passed the Senate 12 years ago that would have really normalized the situation, allowed immigrants who are in this country to get at the back of the line and become citizens, and allow them to keep working in jobs that they were doing. And that didn't happen. And the situation has gotten out of control. But now we still have a situation where immigrants are a huge part of the workforce, the small business workforce. And immigrants continue to start small businesses at twice the rate of U.S.-born citizens. So again, we asked in our most recent network survey, we asked about this issue, and 37% of businesses were concerned about their own businesses or their suppliers. And you think about that, you may run a restaurant and you may have a certain number of immigrants working for you, and that creates uncertainty. But then you also are dependent upon a food supply, which we know is very connected to, it really relies on an immigrant workforce. So, and then construction, hospitality. So we see this across a lot of industries. Out of that 37%, 27% were very concerned. And then again, when they thought about how this is impacting the economy as a whole, 69% were concerned and 58% were very concerned. So we are. This has become, and it's fear. And really, at this point, I mean, you're talking about, even more so than tariffs. You're talking about dramatic things that could happen if a business gets raided and a large part of their workforce is removed. That's an immediate hit on the business. And right now, we're hearing stories about businesses, about people not coming to work. They're scared to come to work. In fact, I believe you featured this story in last week's 21 Hats on Friday as well. So, in fact, this has become a huge issue.
You mentioned with tariffs that there's really not a lot to be done. The president has this power and can exercise it as he wishes. With immigration, is there any guidance that you're able to offer to businesses that are living in fear that this is going to have an impact on them?
Well, in both cases, for the reason we said on tariffs, but also in immigration, the executive branch has a lot of power. Quite frankly, we don't seem to have a Congress that's willing to take the lead on this issue. So you're left with a president who can do what he wants, and I'm sure he believes that this is what he should do. But we're going to see the impact of this, and you hate to say this, but if it's a terrible impact, is he going to change? Is he going to listen? I don't know. I mean, we are doing everything we can to make the case that this is not going to benefit business, not going to benefit small business. And look, we need a rational system. But the reality is, you've got people here who are working. They are doing jobs, essential jobs. And I don't just mean H-1B visas. We certainly need those people to make sure we don't have restrictions on people to come in and do, more high-level jobs. But this is across the entire workforce. And I mean, nobody can deny this fact. If you look at our workforce, there are huge portions of it that include immigrants. And this is, by the way, this is not news. This has always been the case. This is how our economy has always grown. It's how we have had such a dominant economy over the years, is we have integrated immigrants into our economic system. And so, this should not be a surprise to anybody. And I think, people need to realize that there are huge, put aside the personal horror of mass deportations, what we're talking about and where we can contribute to the conversation is the economic problems it's going to create.
I think one thing that sometimes gets lost in this discussion is that we're not, when we're talking, even if we're talking about undocumented immigrants, we're not necessarily talking about people who've just arrived in the past few months or even the past few years. There are people who've been here for decades in some cases, and kind of did what they were told to do. They maybe not in all cases. Maybe they were able to get a job by falsifying documents, but the businesses that employed them did what they were supposed to do. And even with E-Verify, if there was a mismatch, the government often told the businesses, don't take any action, because we've known all along that the economy has needed these workers in order to function. So we're talking about, in many cases, people who've been here a long time, and they're not necessarily just doing entry-level positions or working in agriculture. Many of them are highly skilled and have families and roots and businesses that rely on them greatly. Is there anything you can suggest for a business that is concerned about that?
Well, we're obviously not recommending that people don't follow the law, but you have an economic reality that businesses, as you say, many of these people have been here for a long time, and they're not, and you're right, they're not just doing the most menial jobs. They're doing, in many cases, they've risen to levels of management. And they're huge contributors to our economy. They pay taxes. They contribute to Social Security, in many cases with no assurance that they're ever going to see the benefit of that.
Some assurance they won't see the benefit.
Right. So, and they can't get health insurance within our system, which then puts pressure on local hospitals and emergency rooms. So it's a completely inefficient system. And, yes, if you have look, first of all, the reason many of them have come is an economic reality of their own situations that they're fleeing, but then the need is here. They're coming to work. And so, yes, you've got the folks that have been here for a while, but also many of the new arrivals, a lot of coverage of the fact that these folks needed, that they were dependent upon government support, but they all wanted to work. The government wouldn't have to provide that level of support. Look, there's a lot of aspects of this. Housing's become incredibly expensive. And so, we need a comprehensive solution. But the average business, can't create that entire solution. So while we're certainly not recommending that anybody break the law, if you have a really powerful economic need, it's going to play itself out in the way that it has here. And why it hasn't been a wake-up call to say, okay, maybe we don't like the fact that there are people who are undocumented here. Fine, let's fix the problem. Congress tried to do that. I'm going to give the Senate credit. A bipartisan group of senators came together and put together passed a bill in 2013, and
and more recently as well.
Yes, well, exactly. They passed exactly. It was all set to be passed. I mean, it wasn't quite the comprehensive solution that the bill last decade was, but it was a start. It was the next step, and it was politics that upended it. So, you've got this conflict between people using this issue for to divide and to score points, as opposed to most of the business people in this country, large and small, who want to just run their business, and they need a strong workforce. And we would love nothing more than to have that workforce here legally, have not be breaking the law, not put business owners in a tough situation, and not create fear. Not have a situation that we've been reading about, that business owners, that their employees are just staying home now because they're scared.
Interestingly, next week there will be a confirmation hearing, I believe it's scheduled for Wednesday, for the Trump administration's nominee to take over the SBA. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we certainly wish her well. There's been a lot of developments in the last year in the SBA that we hope she continues. It's a little hard to tell, what her priorities are going to be. She doesn't really have what I would call a small business background. The businesses she's been involved with are more, high-end finance. She did, I will say, when she was in the Senate, everybody knows she was an appointed interim senator for a while. She did support some bills that were good. There was a bill that would have provided additional funding to the CDFI fund to support the economic revitalization of small businesses and local communities. There was a bill that would have incentivized long-term investments in underserved communities by codifying the Minority Business Development Agency. A bill she supported that would have created a new equity-based program within the SBA that would incentivize investment in minority and other under-resourced areas. So she actually does have a track record of supporting some of this, and we hope that she takes that and takes that work that she did on that legislation and actually tries to do something with it when she comes into the SBA. So we're I've talked about some of the issues we have with the Trump administration, but we are ready to work with her, and we are happy that she's had she's demonstrated some interest in small business issues. So I presume she's going to get confirmed, and we stand ready to work with her.
You mentioned her support for some initiatives in which you used a couple of words that are becoming kind of red flag words, minority and equity and diversity. The Trump administration obviously has gone after DEI in terms of the way the federal government operates, but also in businesses that contract with it. There's been a lot reported about how big companies are reacting to this. Do you think this is going to have an impact on your businesses?
Well, specifically as it relates to the SBA, they've got programs that focus on under-resourced businesses. And yes, in some cases, they are designated for communities that have been traditionally under-resourced, BIPOC and communities, women entrepreneurs, veteran entrepreneurs, quite frankly, are also on that list, as does the Minority Business Development Agency. Look, all we can say is those programs are effective. We've done some research into this, and we found that small business owners feel they benefit from these programs. We work with a whole host of partners, of business partners, and community partners across the country, and we welcome the opportunity to work with a partner who's in a particular community. If that partner self-defines as focused on a certain demographic, but they know that demographic, and they can be helpful connecting us with business owners in that demographic and helping us to connect them with resources, we're all for it. We will work with anybody out there who is connected to business owners who need help and need assistance. And, we would obviously prefer that this not be a political, football, that we have these programs in place. And, we support any program with rural businesses, veteran businesses, any program that's going to target a community that has not gotten the benefits of the sort of traditional majority communities in this country, we support. So we haven't heard, certainly on the access to capital side of things at the SBA, we haven't heard, anything is being directly challenged. Our response would be don't go after and attack a program that's working.
Tell me about how you feel about TikTok. TikTok obviously has been used successfully by a lot of very small businesses. Is this something of concern to the businesses in your network?
Absolutely. as you just said, we have a lot of businesses in our network, and particularly the smaller businesses who use it. They use it successfully. We obviously don't, have intimate knowledge of the national security issues, and obviously we would, we're not, we don't want our network members' businesses, their data to be used in ways that are inappropriate. But I will say that if TikTok goes away tomorrow, that is going to create huge problems for a lot of small businesses. And again, just like with many of these other issues, let's figure out a solution that isn't going to have a dramatic upheaval on the small business community. So I think it was actually a good thing to hold on shutting it down. And if there are legitimate national security concerns, let's figure out a solution, because just taking it away is going to harm a lot of very small businesses.
Do you have any sense of how likely that is to happen?
I don't have, we don't have sort of inside information there. I mean, I would like to think, again, something that has practical value for large numbers of businesses, that there would be an impetus to figure out a solution that isn't going to harm them. So I guess I'm cautiously optimistic.
Well, that's kind of the last thing I wanted to ask you about, John. We've talked about a lot of issues here that are concerning. There's a lot of uncertainty, but there's also the surveys I see suggest there's a lot of optimism among small business owners who are greeting this administration and the changes with a lot of hope. We haven't really talked about that. Are you seeing that side of this too?
Well, let me start by saying that there's been increased optimism coming out of the pandemic. Look, I've said this many times. Small businesses are naturally optimistic. You wouldn't do this, head of small business, you wouldn't do this crazy stuff if you weren't optimistic. I mean, the time and the heartache and the lessons you learn the hard way. So, so that's the starting point. You have a group of people who are naturally optimistic. They are still predominantly optimistic. Again, the survey we did, 58% remain optimistic and only 22% pessimistic. So that's encouraging. Before the election, we asked the same question, 64%, so slightly more were optimistic and about the same were pessimistic. And in the summer, we had like a even higher 75% optimistic, 11% pessimistic. So yes, they continue to be optimistic, but for a lot of the reasons that we have just talked about, the uncertainty, some of these issues that have popped up that didn't exist before around tariffs and immigration, I think it's the optimism is a little bit under threat. And what I can say is that what's going to maintain and increase the optimism is government behaving in a rational way that looks at practical issues. I wrote an op-ed piece the other day. It said, why are we talking about Greenland? Let's talk about what small businesses and other players in our economic system need. And that is what is going to maintain and increase the optimism. And, this may involve bipartisan solutions. It will involve bipartisan solutions. It will involve people coming together and saying, this is the problem that needs to be fixed, and not, playing political games. So I think if the games go on and the uncertainty goes on, you're going to see the optimism wane. And we don't want to see that happen. So I'm again, maybe difficult right now, but I am cautiously optimistic that at some point, people will come together and figure out how government can play a constructive role, and people can feel a little more, sort of comfortable with the government's role that's playing in our economic system.
Well, I, for one, am optimistic that this is going to be a very interesting year for business owners, and that you and I will have plenty to talk about whenever you come back this year.
I think that is a certainty, Lauren. There's going to be plenty to talk about. So thanks for having me, and happy to, as always, to come back and chat with you periodically.
John Ahrensmeyer is founder and CEO of Small Business Majority. Thanks for taking the time, John. I always appreciate it. Have a great week, everybody.